My name is Tran. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am currently involved in quite a lot of things, but my biggest focus and area for organizing is around immigrants' rights, particularly through engaging youth leaders within the community to respond to things such as wrongful deportations, barring undocumented students from access to post-secondary education, and sort of enhancing our region's cultural competency when it comes to talking about issues such as immigration and other cultural and ethnic groups. I remember being a freshman in high school, and I really, at that point, I had just come out to a lot of people in my life that, I'm queer, and so I was starting to develop my identity around that and really getting into LGBTQ activism. And then I met a friend who was really involved with equity in education and immigration, and one weekend she convinced me to go to this weekend-long civil rights training that a local nonprofit organization, which is now closed, but at the time it was the Charlotte Coalition for Social Justice. So we spent an entire weekend in the woods at a camp, and we learned about the civil rights movement. We learned about people like Ella Baker, we learned about Malcolm X, we learned about Martin Luther King Jr., and then we applied it to our present, and we talked about the issues we saw within our communities, and that really lit my fire, because I started to think about the other aspects of my identity. And as time went on, as I went to the higher grade, as I met more people that sort of opened my eyes and plugged me in and made me conscious, I started getting involved into immigration as one of the primary things because I'm an immigrant. I come from an immigrant family, and it was just really, in a lot of ways, it was just really heart-wrenching to find that there were many other people who were immigrants just like me, but experiencing very different levels of it. I met someone by the name of Elver Barrios, and he really taught me about the issues, coming from this perspective of being someone who's undocumented, having family members who are undocumented, and that's really how I got started, by people passing me along and helping me transition into the process. One of the campaigns that I work on with the group I work with, United for the Dream, is an education, not deportation campaign. So what we do is we, in our area, in Charlotte and surrounding cities, we reach out, so it's completely public, we reach out to people who are currently in deportation proceedings, may feel like they have a deportation proceedings, or they're caught up in the immigration system in some way or another. And what we do is we sit down with them and we talk about their situation. We ask them extensive questions about, when did they get here? Why do they feel like there's something up? And we work with undocumented students mostly who are under the age of 25 and are DREAM Act eligible, meaning that if the DREAM Act were to pass, which is basically a relief legislation for undocumented students, they would be able to enter a 4-year college or 2 years in military in order to gain citizenship at some point in time. But what we do in the meantime is we meet with these students and we address their needs, and then we try to get their deportation proceedings not upheld but appealed. And through that we do media campaigns, so they share their stories, so we assist them in the process of framing their message, and so we hold a media campaign, we seek out pro bono immigration lawyers, and so that's one of the biggest things that we're doing in our communities, and to sort of meet legislation halfway, because we can't really sit around forever and wait for DREAM Act to pass, because it's been a really long time. And so we have a program called College Access para Todos, which means college access for everyone. And what we do is we help undocumented students and immigrant students alike get the necessary training and education that's needed in order to go through the college application process, because what happens is that we are trained in our education system to, like figure out what we're going to do after high school and, what our lifelong career will be. But what happens is that if you are undocumented and your teachers or counselors know they don't have the right information, so many of these students up into their junior year, or even before that, they're completely discouraged. A lot of them tend to drop out because they're just like, there's no opportunity at all for me to go on to college. So we try to bring these students in. This program is a year old, and so far we've gotten over 70 undocumented students into a local private university with full scholarships. And so we're working to not only rebuild these students' self-esteem, but to also reform and create a new education system where teachers, counselors, faculty, and staff are getting the right training, and that undocumented students know from the very beginning that regardless of their immigration status, they're able to go to college later on. If you want to get involved in the work, the first thing that you have to do is to just go on Google and type something in and start reading. And you really have to start to think about the community that you're in and the people that you're connected to, because a lot of times we tend to think that we don't know people in these situations. But when we open up ourselves and we open up our homes and our lives to have these conversations, we're able to build a more trusting community where people who are in these situations can step up and say, I need an ally. I need someone to work with me through this. But the biggest thing again is just to get yourself connected and get yourself educated, because it's better to come to the table and say, this is what I've learned on my own so far, and I want to be able to learn how to move that further. And just realizing your responsibility in the entire framework of communities. Even your decision to not do anything or your inaction is in of itself inaction. And so apathy doesn't help. If you really want to get started in this type of work and working to defend yourself, the people in your community, you have to take the first step and get educated and talk to people and make those connections. In the scheme of a larger movement, I see myself as someone who works to cultivate people who can lead themselves. One of my icons from the civil rights movement is Ella Baker, because she believed that good people did not need leaders. And a lot of times, so many of our movements and so many of our communities, and rightfully so, are devoted to maybe one or two primary leaders. And in many frameworks that's necessary, like we saw in the civil rights movement, in the women's rights movement, and then we also see the other side of it, such as the current Occupy movement, where there's no formal infrastructure for leadership. And in the entire scheme of things, I want to be able to be someone who can cultivate mutually beneficial relationships, where people have enough confidence to share their stories and share their skills so that they don't need a leader. And because, a lot of times the concept of leadership is very bloated, and the reality of it is that there would be no leader without the first follower. So that's where I see myself in larger movements, just taking it one step at a time.